Hello and welcome to Africa This Week with me, Adama Munu. This show looks at the affairs of sub-Saharan Africa and the African diaspora. We look at news, politics, culture and community initiatives. Today, we'll be looking at what is next for South Sudan now that President Kiir has agreed to sign the peace deal, a week after it was brokered in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. We'll have our regular review of articles by special guests. And 4 months after Ivory Coast banned skin whitening creams, we look at whether black is truly beautiful. But first, last week saw President Pierre Nkurunziza assume his third term in office as president amidst glaring opposition both in Burundi and internationally. Amnesty International has released a report stating how Burundian security forces used iron bars and acid to crush opposition during Nkurunziza's bid. Afsal Ahmed has more on this story and the rest of the week's headline news.
Testimonies recorded by Amnesty in the report accuse both the police and National Intelligence Service, or SNR, of carrying out what they call torture and other ill treatment since April 2015. The report, entitled "Just Tell Me What to Confess To," says police beat people with electric cables and batons, while the SNR used iron bars, as well as forcing detainees' heads under dirty water. Amnesty said it tried to contact the police and SNR, but had received no response to the report. A South African court on Tuesday granted bail to one of Nelson Mandela's grandsons, who is facing charges of raping an underage girl. The 24-year-old is alleged to have raped the 15-year-old at a popular pub in a suburb north of Johannesburg on August the 7th. He spent 10 days in custody before a Johannesburg magistrate granted him bail of 7,000 rand. Magistrate Paul du Plessis ordered the suspect to surrender his passport and not to contact any of the witnesses as part of his bail conditions. The case is the latest to tarnish the family of the late icon, who died in 2013. Earlier this year, Mandela, the eldest of the late statesman's grandsons, was convicted of assaulting a motorist during a road rage incident. A teenager detonated an explosive device strapped to their body in the northeastern Nigerian city of Damaturu early on Tuesday, killing 5 people and wounding about 30, this according to the police. Officials at the State Emergency Management Agency said the suicide bomber tried to enter the motor park or bus station and was accosted by civilian vigilantes. She then pulled away and set off the bomb. Another person with a bomb struck in Damaturu, already rocked by a separate deadly bombing just 10 minutes earlier. Zimbabwe's veteran president Robert Mugabe was booed and heckled by opposition lawmakers over the deteriorating economy as he gave his State of the Nation address to Parliament on Tuesday. Movement for Democratic Change lawmakers questioned his economic policies, jeering as the 91-year-old delivered a policy speech which lasted less than half an hour. Mugabe presented a 10-point plan which included boosting agricultural growth, encouraging private sector investment. The economy of the southern African nation has been on a downward spiral for more than a decade, with slow growth, low liquidity and high unemployment. The family of a young man from Ghana spoke about the son and brother, Nazir Note Alema, who told them he had travelled to an Islamic State training camp. His brother Kabira Alema said he and his parents were caught completely unaware. Kabiru said the family saw a WhatsApp message from Nazir on August the 16th, saying he was at a training ground to join the Islamic State group in an unknown country. About a third of Ghana's 27 million population is Muslim. They coexist peacefully with the Christian majority and have so far apparently avoided the influence of the kinds of radical Islam that have taken root in neighbouring Nigeria and Mali. And it's almost certain he was radicalised through his interactions on Facebook. The Ghanaian government was not immediately available for comment. In an effort to boost trade under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, otherwise known as AGOA, representatives from 39 African countries began holding talks with US officials at the opening of a 2-day forum in Libreville in Gabon on Wednesday. AGOA, the fresh US trade pact renewed by Congress for a decade in June, could provide relief to African economies buffeted by the commodities slump. But a failure to reform during the boom years has left many countries unable to profit from tariff-free access to the world's largest market. Under the deal first signed in the year 2000, African exports to the United States rose to $26.8 billion by 2013. but more than 4/5 of that was oil, with US demand for petroleum imports falling due to its shale revolution and commodities prices across the board hit by China's slowdown. The blow to African economies has highlighted the failure to industrialize. Relatives of over 200 Nigerians with hope dwindling for their rescue despite a renewed push to end the insurgency.
That's what they said. They will negotiate. When 500 days, they're still seeking for negotiation for Christ's sake. If it's their own baby, how would they feel?
The landmark comes amid a worsening security crisis in northeastern Nigeria, where militia have stepped up deadly attacks since the inauguration of President Muhammadu Buhari, killing more than 1,000 people in 3 months. Dozens of young campaigners known as the Chibok Girls Ambassadors processed through the streets of the capital dressed in the signature red T-shirts, many with red ribbons tied to their hair and around their heads. South Sudan's president has signed a peace deal ending the country's 20-month-old conflict, but will list his reservations in an annex to the pact. President Salva Kiir delayed signing the deal in the Ethiopian capital last week, saying he needed more time for consultations. Rebel leader Riek Machar has already signed the peace deal that was brokered by the regional African grouping, IGAD. The conflict, which has exposed deep ethnic divisions, erupted after a power struggle between Kiir, a Dinka, and Machar, a Nur. Mediation officials and diplomats previously indicated Kiir's concerns include proposals for Juba to be a demilitarized zone and a demand he consulted his first vice president on decisions. Machar is expected to take that post. Afzal Ahmed, Africa This Week.
For the discussion on South Sudan, we have on Skype Brian Adeba, who is an associate at Security Governance Group in Canada, and he is also a journalist and observer on South Sudanese affairs. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, this is a week since we saw the deal and the attempt to broker it in Ethiopia, and there was a lot of discussion about why President Machar decided not to concede to the deal. What do you think about that?
That's true. Eventually, President Kiir was going to sign this deal, but the delay was basically to reassure his base. He was sending the message saying that I am not for this deal, but it's being thrust down my throat and I have to sign it. But I am with you in this scenario. I'm with you and I'm not selling you down the river. In a nutshell, that encapsulates why there was a delay in signing the deal. He was going to sign it anyway because there was a lot of pressure from within South Sudan and from the region and the rest of the international community.
I mean, this is a deal that is about 75 pages long. Thank you for correcting me, as President Kiir. What are the key aspects of the deal itself?
The major aspect of the deal is a power-sharing deal, a power-sharing agreement that takes a lot of power away from the government. The government had absolute control of power within the structure of South Sudan. Right now, what's going to happen is that it's going to be shared with the SPLM opposition rebels of Riek Machar. So the government gets slightly something over 53%, and the Riek Machar rebels get something like about 33%, and the rest of the power is shared with other political parties within South Sudan. So that's a major aspect of it. Another aspect of the deal is that there is going to be two militaries, basically until the interim period ends. So that's also proved contentious to the government side. Also, there's the creation of a hybrid court to try crimes against humanity and genocide, and so that also has proved to be a contentious issue. But in a nutshell, these are the major aspects of the deal.
Do you think then, what with the two-sided military arrangements, and even as you spoke about the courts to try wars against against humanity. Do you believe then that this is a peace deal that isn't truly complete?
Well, in a peace deal, you don't get everything that you ask for. You meet your opponent halfway. So the success of this deal itself will rest on the political determination, the political will of both entities to live up to the stipulations of the deal. That being said, the two entities in this conflict require a lot of support from the international community and within the region, to ensure that the stipulations of this agreement are adhered to. Most importantly, I think the region could play a significant role in trying to ensure that justice for any crimes committed during the fighting is delivered, and people are reassured that these kinds of crimes will not occur again. Also of significant importance is the threat of sanctions. This should be explored, and it should be dangled to let the opponents in this conflict to know that if they don't live up to the stipulations of the deal, they could face targeted sanctions that could limit their travel, inhibit their process of transferring money across the region, and also disrupt their capacity to wage war.
Well, it's very interesting that you talk about the role of the international community in this. The international community's pressure has definitely played a very important role in the brokering of this deal. We actually have a tweet that I would like to read out from somebody called Laura Sayi, who says that intense diplomatic pressure to sign a peace deal means a signed peace deal, not actual peace. Do you agree with the statement? I mean, you spoke about the importance of both sides of both on the Sudanese government side and the rebel side to have the political determination. But if the international community as a whole, including the US, have played such an important role, how does South Sudan stand as an example for other countries to take control of their own affairs?
Well, controlling one's own affairs is something that's desirable, but in the absence of any will to live up to the stipulations of sovereignty, being able to provide for your people, being able to cater to the needs of the population, being able to cater to security ideals, then an external arbitrator is required, and this is what's happening in this scenario in South Sudan. It's not desirable, but if left to their own devices, I doubt that the two opponents here will willingly pursue what's stipulated in the deal. Kiir himself mentioned that if it is left to us, quote, we will spoil this agreement, and we need support. So the international community's support in this instance is going to be crucial. And when I say international community, I'm not only meaning the Western countries, but crucially the countries in the region, especially Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, and Sudan.
Well, in terms of the ceasefire itself, there have been threats of action if the ceasefire is not kept. There could be sanctions placed by the UN, so there's going to be a lot of scrutiny over the course of the next couple of days. But do you not agree that Sudan has certain characteristics that could make it very difficult for this to hold? I mean, even President Kiir himself said that he has very little doubt, he has very little certainty in this deal.
That's true. I mean, but if the opponents or in this war put the interests of the people of South Sudan ahead, and then there is a probability that this deal will work. It all depends on how they reassure the hardliners within their camps that this is a deal that's good for the people of South Sudan, and we should put the interests of the people of South Sudan ahead of our own political interests. And that's the key to ensuring that this deal actually works.
And what do you think about the role that other African countries, because when we talk about the international community, most people might take into account the powers within the Western world and organizations like the UN. But what about regional countries such as Uganda and Kenya. What has their been response to this, particularly because many of these countries have supported different sides of the debate?
Their role is crucial. I mean, to a large extent, whether this deal holds or not will depend on the external actors in the conflict. We know very well that this South Sudanese armed opposition is supported by Sudan, and the government of Uganda supports the Kiir regime in Juba. So there is a stipulation in the agreement itself that says that all foreign actors, armed actors, and specifically the rebel groups of the Sudanese opposed to the Sudanese government that are currently sort of operating or have a tendency of crossing the border into South Sudan to fight alongside the government, that these rebel groups should leave and go back to Sudan. And so this is a very clear indication that if these rebel groups don't leave, Sudan might continue, could continue supporting some of them to destabilize, to support South Sudanese rebels to destabilize South Sudan. For instance, there are holdout rebels within the Machar ranks at the moment. And these rebels are led by a general called Peter Gadet, who is currently in Khartoum. So in the long term, the success of this deal depends on how both governments, the Juba government and the Khartoum government, relate to each other in terms of supporting each other's rebels. And also the role of Uganda, which is very crucial as well, because Uganda is concerned that Sudan offers support to the Lord's Resistance Army, and therefore it is very wary of any government in Juba that is sort of leading to Khartoum. So these are the dynamics to put into consideration in evaluating whether the peace deal will succeed or not.
Well, we'll be looking out for the story and the developments with respect to the peace deal. But thank you so much for coming onto the show, Brian. Do stay with us, as after the break, we'll be having our review on the news. See you in a moment.